Now, joining me now is our U.S. Report regular, former White House Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor at Bondi Partners, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, thanks so much for coming on the program tonight. First of all, I've had a few people come up to me, though, and say, look, love watching Mick Mulvaney on the show, but is he related to that Dylan person from the Bud Light ads? When are we going to see you advertising, I don't know, Chateau Mix Shiraz?
James, I actually looked into it because it's a very unusual surname. There's not a lot of Mulvaneys in the country. So we did look it up. There's a book of genealogy about the family. And I'm not related to the Dylan Mulvaney person in San Diego. I was actually a little bit disappointed because I actually think if he, she, whatever they go by, was related to me, the former Trump official chief of staff, it would probably hurt their reputation more than it would hurt mine. But for better or for worse, we are not kin.
Who knows? Maybe Anheuser-Busch would have, picked that up and said, no, look, they're related. It's all good. But anyway, let's move on.
I'm available to do Bud Light ads if they want to hire me to sort of bring balance back again to the universe. So
Anheuser-Busch, you've heard it here first. Get in touch with Mick through the program. We'll set it up. Also, let's move on, though, to Washington, where there were extraordinary scenes where Republicans have opened hearings on the weaponization of the FBI. And they heard testimony from Special Agent Garrett O'Boyle about this. Have a listen to this.
How do you think that solves being able to shine light on corruption, weaponization, any kind of misconduct that exists with the American people?
It doesn't solve it, but the FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. And we are all examples of that.
I can't think of a more sobering way to end a hearing.
Now, all this comes on the heels of the Durham report this week. How can the FBI recover its reputation when it is being dragged as being quite a political organization now, but one that has badges and guns and the authority to put people in jail?
Yeah, they've got a problem. They really do. But you ask a really good question, which is how do they restore credibility? And I think there's a short answer, which is I think they end up charging Hunter Biden while the president is still in office. You hear things in this town that maybe they have enough to charge him, but they're sort of perhaps waiting until Biden is out of office as a sort of a courtesy to a president of the United States. But I think if they were to charge Hunter Biden, it might actually help restore some credibility. It's going to be hard, James. It's really, really difficult. I'm here in Washington right now, and even the Democrats who are saying, oh, there's nothing to see here, what they know and they're talking about privately is that the deep state is real. It absolutely is. The Durham report sort of puts any debate to bed, is that the deep state is real. It may not be the same as described by folks like Steve Bannon. It may not be as aggressively awful. It may not be as pervasive, but it's real. There are people who work for the federal government who are willing to use the power of the federal government to attack their political opponents. And that's I don't know if it's a first in this nation, but it's certainly it's more dramatic now than it's ever been in my adult lifetime. And the whole federal government has an image problem that they need to deal with.
And also, though, too, Mick, don't a lot of Democrats have a huge problem? I mean, will there be any consequences for people like Adam Schiff, who used the House Intelligence Committee to push all sorts of bogus stories about Trump that tore the country apart? Will there ever be any consequences for people like that either?
Yeah, Adam Schiff is never going to get elected to anything again, I don't think. But keep in mind, this is a guy who went on TV famously and repeatedly, again and again, said that he had hard evidence of collusion between Russia and Donald Trump. And that's just a lie. It's a flat out lie. Now, granted, politicians they're not known for being 100% truthful all of the time, but that's the sort of thing that really has ripped the country apart. I don't know if there's any, certainly not a criminal activity, but it should be some type of pushback against people who are willing to look into a camera, especially elected officials, and flat out lie to people in order to divide the country and in order to gain a political advantage. It's troublesome. I take some solace in the fact that Schiff is probably never going to get elected again. He really wants to be a senator. I'm sure he'd love to be president. That's not going to happen. But listen, we have to get to the point where there's some cost to lying to the American public like Adam Schiff did.
But is there a political problem here? Because Donald Trump will obviously use all of this very much to his advantage in the 2024 campaign. But because he's the messenger for it, is that going to make it easier for the Democrats and an awful lot of the media to say to their base, well, look, you don't have to believe any of this stuff. Everything's fine because it's just Trump again who's out there saying that?
You're seeing that in the last 48 hours here since the Durham report came out. That's what the Democrats are all saying is like, look, we don't believe any of this. There's nothing to see here. It's Donald Trump. We all know the man's a criminal. It's sort of like they don't care about process. Now, that being said, if they had come out when Trump was found liable of sexual abuse last week, half of the country, roughly, probably 35%, said, I don't believe that either. So we're to the point now where half the country doesn't believe the truth half of the time, and that is a real problem. Again, we talk about credibility in the federal government. The institutions of this country have a credibility problem right now, and credibility is really, really hard to get back after you've lost it.
Yeah, indeed. You couldn't have said it better. But let's move on, though, to Ron DeSantis, who has been sort of, a little bit out of the headlines lately. But the New York Times is now reporting that the Florida governor is going to formally announce his campaign as soon as this coming week. But the polls show Trump running away with the nomination. Why has DeSantis suddenly been coming off second best in all of this?
Oh, listen, it's early in the race. While Ron has run for office in a major state, Florida, twice, and did extraordinarily well, running for president is a different level of thing. Now, keep in mind, if he does not announce next week, he could be one of as many as 3 who announce next week. I'm going to Charleston, South Carolina on Monday. We all expect my friend Tim Scott to announce that he's running for president next week. We hear that maybe Ron DeSantis is going to announce next week as well. And Mike Pence is making grumblings like before the end of the month, he might be announcing as well. I think when that happens, and it's not just Trump and DeSantis, there's other folks for the media to sort of focus on. I think you start to see Ron doing a little better. So get a chance to get his feet under him. The Around the World tour was a little bit flat, but again, it's a long way off from the first ballot. I'm not too worried about the polling data. Keep in mind, there's a poll out today that says that Biden beats Trump by 7 points in the national popular vote, but of course that doesn't make any difference because we don't have a popular vote for president. Yeah. So you're going to see a lot of polling data. The real question is momentum. Are the candidates raising money? Are they gaining traction in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina? That's what I'll be looking at, not this real early polling data.
Well, I was going to ask you about some of this polling because I saw that same poll, but then an awful lot of the other polls show that both Trump and DeSantis would, in a general, beat Joe Biden. And on that question of momentum, what are you hearing about concerns among the Democrats that Joe Biden doesn't have the stamina to have the momentum of a presidential campaign? I mean, we saw him cancel his trip to Australia this week, purportedly because of the debt negotiations. We know how much time he spends on holiday or with a lid placed on public events at the White House. Is there growing concern that, for all of his charms, Joe Biden just may be a little weary, shall we say, to do the rigors of a presidential campaign again?
It is their big concern. And as much as the Democrats put on a good face, and they have to, right? He's going to be their nominee. He's the head of the party. He's the sitting president, for goodness sake. They're going to say nice things that he's going to be a great candidate, et cetera. The risk that they know they face is that the dynamic will be different than it was in 2020. As you and I have talked about a lot, the 2020 election was not a normal election. It was not Biden versus Trump. It was Trump versus Trump. And more people voted against Trump than voted for him. And Biden was able to sit in his basement because of COVID and because of Donald Trump's unique sort of persona. Now, the fact that Biden is getting so much more, he's getting older. He just is. And his inabilities, his lack of capacity is becoming more and more apparent. If Joe Biden does end up in a more traditional head-to-head race where it becomes a binary choice between Biden and Trump, Trump could win. And the Democrats really, really don't like that. And they have a liability in Kamala Harris. Because Trump is DeSantis, excuse me, goodness gracious, because Biden is so old, who the vice president is really going to make a difference for the first time in a generation. So, yeah, they're putting forward a good face, but they know in the back rooms that they might have a problem going into the 2024.
And finally, Mick, on more immediate problems, what is your read? Because you talk to an awful lot of people on what's happening with these debt ceiling negotiations. Now, I don't imagine a default is actually likely, but I'm also hearing that Democrats on the progressive wing of the party are concerned that the White House is going to give in, and they want the president to do some sort of constitutional chicanery to raise the debt ceiling unilaterally. What are you hearing? And where, Mick, do you reckon this all lands?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough. I testified actually to Congress yesterday on the debt ceiling. They had me come in as the former budget director, as a Republican witness to testify for a couple of hours. We talked about exactly this. I don't think the constitutional argument that the progressives are making is getting much traction at all amongst the mainstream Democrats. I do think they're going to cut a deal, that there's going to be some work requirements for some sort of social welfare, not Medicaid, but say other type of programs that we have. And I think the Democrats recognize now that they're going to lose the progressive wing of their party. Keep in mind, this is one of those 60 votes in the Senate. It's not going to be a vote that's 50 Democrats and 10 Republicans, because that bill probably can't pass the House. It's going to be a bill that is probably 40 Democrats and 20 Republicans. The Republicans will lose the far right, the Democrats will lose the far left, and that bill will actually pass. So just as Kevin McCarthy is probably not counting on the Freedom Caucus to vote for the final deal, I think the Biden White House is finally recognizing that they're going to lose the far left. Keep in mind, they've cut Chuck Schumer out of these negotiations entirely. The negotiations being run by the current Office of Management Budget Director of the White House. So my guess is they know they're going to lose some Democrat votes, and they're okay with that.
Mick Mulvaney, it sounds like you're talking about centrism and bipartisanship and all sorts of crazy stuff I haven't heard talked about for ages. Thanks so much for your insight. I really appreciate it.